and it was an interesting time.
Hmm.
We wouldn't know when we went to office. This was in the late 80s. So we literally didn't know when the company would be there tomorrow because they were all the brink of bankruptcy all the time. And it was also a good learning.
Was Lee Iacocca, he's a very fascinating character actually. But he comes across as being very cool and so on.
No, I think see the auto industry leadership, they were all like that. They had a chip on their shoulders. Right? I mean, Lee was the father of the Mustang at Ford. He was leading that. He got fired from there, and then went to Chrysler, took the plans of the minivan with him, which then became a roaring success. The K car platform, kind of brought them back, kept them in the game. I won't say brought them back, kept them in the game. And then, of course, they improved the entire product line, came back. Right? So interesting story. I mean, it's the tech center that Chrysler has in Auburn Hills, Michigan. Was when you walk in there, you feel you're walking into a mall, and there's a story behind it. The people who bankrolled the building of the tech center didn't know if the company would exist by the time the tech center was done with construction. So they wanted an alternative. So it was designed in a way in which could be very easily converted into a shopping mall. Not that that would have been a great investment either, but that's a different issue. But they had an alternative for that tech center when it was built. So if you walk in there, initially when it was built, it felt like you're walking into a shopping mall. Yeah, the auto industry is a fascinating. It's gone through its own gyrations. I spent 12 years there, so so got to see it from the inside.
So
Very
there's
different.
so Lee Iacocca has a very interesting saying where I don't know whether I'm quoting it correctly, but the essence of it is that when the bullshit becomes more than the money, it's time to go.
It's probably true. He was quite a colorful character himself. So
so, so I think also it's very manufacturing, I think, and in that sense.
well, I mean, the tech industry would have been interspersed with a lot of other words, but yeah, I mean, the essence remains about the same. It was quite a cultural difference. I spent 12 years in the auto industry, then I went to Microsoft in 2000, and the old Microsoft was a tough place also. It was an interesting place as well.
The old Microsoft, okay.
Yeah, now it's a kinder, gentler Microsoft under Satya. The old Microsoft was a hard-nosed place, internally and externally.
How are, of course, you must have had some contact with Intel and so on and so forth.
Mhm.
So post Andy Grove days, have they sort of changed or have they remained like that and so on?
No, I mean, we just lost our CEO back to Intel, right? So Pat Gelsinger, who was the VMware CEO, in fact, in 3 more days, his last days at VMware. He came from Intel, so he was the CTO of Intel. He spent 30 years at Intel. Uh, he didn't get the CEO job last time around, so he left and then went to EMC. Then he's been a VMware CEO for the last 8 years, uh, and he was an Andy Grove protege. Right? So Intel has kind of fallen in hard times. So they attracted Pat to come back to Intel as the new CEO to turn it around, right? So that's why he's going there. And Pat is fantastic. I mean, he's one of the most. He was the father of the 486, right? He was the original 486 chip. So I think they want to get the magic back, the what used to be there. It's kind of fallen by they've kind of fallen behind, right? The race.
Is Intel getting into hard times the result of they waking up late to the fact of mobile processor growth, where the whole mobile world shifted towards RISC processor ARM, while Intel tried to push even CISC processor there? They were too late to wake up to the reality and they fell behind.
Well, I mean, there is, but still, if you look at where the growth is in the cloud, it is
Yeah.
still Intel processors. Okay.
Yeah, they have the growth there. Of course, volume business, they have fallen behind. Now, what happens is bulk of their revenue came from laptop desktops, which are in billion. But now people will go for thin clients, everything goes to cloud. So the volumes will come down because how much can you have in centralized servers?
No,
That way.
fair enough. But they also didn't execute. I think they fell behind on a lot of things. Their latest chips,
Yeah.
there's been a lot of challenges at Intel on execution.
Yeah.
Which is why Pat is going back there to fix that.
Yeah, all companies get into this problem when they're doing very well. Because somebody woke up, ARM processor consumed less power for same functionality. They implemented and they're deeply into it now.
Intel had the Atom. I mean, that's what they were competing with. But I probably, any answer would be simplistic, right? Because there are so many dynamics of companies
I
that
know,
happen.
it is always tough. No, by the way, Atom is of a lower capability compared to i3, but it is still a RISC processor, not RISC. They try to make it save battery power and all, it was no match. Anyway, it happens. The greatest companies falter. The faltering begins when they're at the highest, enjoying profit.
No, of course. I mean, but they turn around, right? I mean, look at Microsoft is a great example of that. I mean, they fell behind too, for the longest time. New
But with
leadership.
cloud, Azure, they seem to be back. They're
No, that's what
next
I'm saying.
to
So
AWS.
these things go in cycles, and you have to kind of.
Yeah.
And so, Pat is a fantastic leader. I mean, we are very, very unhappy to have lost him. He's absolutely a fantastic leader, both at a people level and at he's more technical than most of the technologists. So I think I would bet on Intel making a comeback, just because of Pat.
Mm-hmm.
He will attract the right people back to the company.
Yeah.
So I think we are. There was a lot of mourning inside VMware when he announced he was going to Intel as a CEO.
We'll just give it about 5 minutes, 3-4 minutes. I'm sorry, because people are still joining in.
Sure. This is a good chat. We're almost done. You should have just recorded this and you can play it for the rest of the folks.
Yeah.
I didn't meet, I think, Shankar and Professor Krishna Kumar Rao last time.
Professor Shankar is actually one of our senior most professors. He is a veteran of the IT industry, worked in companies like HCL and so on and so forth. So he transitioned like you from manufacturing to IT. And he teaches business analytics.
That is interesting. Where was it? Manufacturing?
I was in the auto industry for 12 years.
Automotive?
Yeah. So I was at Chrysler and Ford.
Which company was it?
Chrysler and then Ford.
Oh, lovely. Now, that's why you were discussing that. Now, Peugeot Citroën has taken over, right? Chrysler and Fiat. Now it is, right? The merger of Peugeot Citroën and Fiat Chrysler.
Correct.
One big entity. Yeah.
Chrysler has always been a bargaining chip in a lot of transactions over the last 20 years, 30 years or whatever.
Yeah, when I was in US, I had a Plymouth Reliant. For my wife, I bought it. It had a Mitsubishi engine. They got into collaboration with Mitsubishi because of fuel efficient engines. Somehow they didn't put it all together. After Lee Iacocca, who turned around with that huge people carrier, it turned around, and after Iacocca, it just started crumbling.
Yeah.
So quickly, can I sort of, you also probably have not met Professor Anant Popli. He is our Director of Corporate Relations. You can see him here on the screen.
Good evening.
Good evening.
And he's also a professor. He teaches, not too much, but he does teach. and but generally he takes care of student placement, and he runs a very interesting program called um, industry preparedness program, where we prepare students for the final industry push across about 2 years. And so that's Anant. And we also have, of course, Dr. Krishna Kumar Rao, who again, very senior. He teaches HR and various other subjects. He's an alumni of IIM Calcutta, and he too. So we've got some really senior people on our program, basically.
Good evening, sirs. My privilege to attend today's session.
Good evening. Good to meet you as well.
So good. I think we can get going. Professor Rajan, are we good to go?
Sir, I think we can start. Yeah, 165 is a good number. I think we can start. Yeah. Recording also is started.
Yeah. So thank you, Mr. Ramkumar Narayanan, for being here, and good evening to all the participants of the Distinguished Speaker Series, Season 2, brought to you from Dayanand Sagar University. I'd particularly like to thank Mr. Narayanan for being here today. He's a busy man, the Vice President Technology and Managing Director of VMware India. Ramkumar Ram Narayanan is a global leader focused on data-driven digital product innovations spanning consumer and enterprise markets. He brings a vast experience in product development, product management, and product marketing, having led both new market entry and turnaround of existing business areas. He has been an advisor to enterprises large and small in the arena of digital transformation, product strategy, and product marketing. Ram is currently Vice President Technology and Managing Director at VMware India, where he leads strategy and growth for VMware's largest global center outside its headquarters in Palo Alto, United States. This includes working closely with the company leadership on portfolio management, talent strategy, and positioning of VMware as a leading organization in India. He serves on the board of directors of VMware Software India Private Limited. Prior to joining VMware, he served in global leadership positions at eBay, Yahoo, and Microsoft. He started his career in the auto industry in the United States, developing software solutions for design and packaging of automotive suspension and powertrain systems. Ram serves on the executive committee of NASSCOM and the governing council of the Derby Foundation, an academic incubator. He is also a board member of Sukino Healthcare, a leading provider of long-term healthcare management for patients with chronic ailments. Ram holds a Bachelor of Engineering in Mechanical Engineering from the Anna University, Chennai, MS in Mechanical Engineering, and an MBA from the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, the United States. On behalf of the management at Dayanand Sagar University, I would like to welcome Mr. Narayanan again to this fireside chat, as well as my colleagues from Dayanand Sagar University, and of course, the students of the MBA and the Executive MBA programs who have turned up here in pretty large numbers for this very interesting fireside chat. And so I can go with the first question, or I could request Professor Shankar or Anant to sort of take the first questions after Mr. Narayanan has had his opening remarks, if there are any.
Thank you. First of all, Dr. Subbarao, Professor, thank you for inviting me and reaching out. It's an honor for me to be here. I almost feel part of the Dayanand Sagar family because I've been part of the Derby Foundation Governing Council for the last 5 or 6 years, or almost 5-6 years, which has been a great learning experience, and had a chance to interact with a number of faculty outside of the group here. And so, I've been a frequent visitor to your center in Kudlu Gate, which I was not aware that that time that's where this is housed as well. So it's an honor for me to be here. Thank you for having me. In terms of opening remarks, first of all, let me congratulate all the students who are here, because I think the fact that if you're part of the executive MBA means that you've taken the time after you've started working to figure out, how to keep learning. And I think I also, just to share, I started my MBA 9 years after I started my career. And so I had already been working for a number of years. I also did mine as an evening program or an executive MBA, but it was in the US, it's a common degree. So we don't differentiate. But it was quite a challenge, right? I mean, holding a full-time job at that time, I was an entrepreneur, I was running my own company, but also doing classes and doing everything else. So I think it's to me, I would say, looking back, is those few years that I did my MBA was completely transformative for me personally, right? In spite of the fact that I've been working for a number of years. So congratulations to all of you for taking the step in terms of what you're doing. Now, learning never ends, right? As all of you can testify, it's a constant process. I learn every day. But I think some of the things that you learn in an MBA, and we were just chatting before we got started, some of the frameworks, I was telling Captain Subbarao that, the Porter's Five Forces continues to be my all-time favorite. It's in terms of anytime somebody throws a problem at me, it gives me a very quick and it's easy, dirty way to quickly analyze the situation and figure out what is going on, right? What the challenges are, and a few other frameworks over time. So I think, while you look at your classes and go through it, sometimes you don't realize until several years after you finished your MBA that a lot of the things that you learned in those classes actually make sense in the real world. So for that, I think, it's a big plus. The other piece, on a more lighter note, I was telling also Captain Subbarao that classes like organizational behavior or HR and things like that, when you're going through it, especially MBA, a lot of other things look a lot more, sexy, if you may, right? I mean, things like strategy and marketing and all these other things. But today, if I look back, I think the classes which I should have paid more attention to were those classes, because as you grow in your career and you become a general manager and you start leading large organizations, the thing that motivates, how do you bring an organization together, build purpose for it? How do you motivate them? How do you build leadership? Leadership not by title, but by actions and all of those things, right? Which is really what organizational behavior is about. How do you orchestrate a large organization is really what it's about. So anyway, I'm looking forward. I don't want to take up too much time. I'm looking forward to the interaction. I loved interacting with MBA students because it's challenging, and two, it can go in any direction. So I'm up for it. So let's get going, I guess.
So thank you very much and for that introduction. And I'm privileged as I teach organizational behavior, like I told you, and it's a very important course. And I would urge students here and participants to sort of drop their questions to the chat mode, and so that I can sort of field them to Mr. Narayanan as we go along. But I would invite Professor Shankar. Do you have a question? Would you like to kick off?
Yeah, one thing, I've already framed my questions here. See, one of the thing is, if I take a topic at what our workplace would be like by 2030, correct? Now, we are trying to extrapolate the current situation. Now, the way I look at it is, we are fortunate because there is a disruption. See, before disruption, people are aligned, they go about doing their things their own way, unmindful of what is happening, whether it is efficient way to do or inefficient way to do. Now that the disruption has come, people could produce, work from home and be as effective. There are hiccups here and there. Overall, now the question is, why don't we operate this way normally also? See, I remember my work in BT in UK. Most of British managers worked from home. The reason is the parking charges in heart of London was £10 an hour, and BT gave managers £300 to £400 extra per month because they were saving office space. Rentals were expensive. If you're talking of sustainability, every human activity creates an environmental footprint. If you look at it, we may have to sit and define what should be our future state of working. those who can work from should work from home. I think this is the best time to redefine our way of working and design a new way to go forward. That's what I feel. That is one way. The other is what may happen to the world. Let's see how to adjust to it. These are my thoughts.
Sure. I think, would you like me to respond to it, or how would you like to?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, all right. So, last year as we got into, so this, when January 1st, 2020 was born, there was a projection that this would be a digital decade. In fact, NASSCOM called it the decade, right? And little did we know that 3 months into the year, the world is going to be thrown into what it is today, right? And so the great disruption, as you called it, happened. And all of us were kind of thrown into a model where in the past we would have tiptoed our way to it, right? We'd have, what was 10 years projection kind of got accelerated dramatically because of that. But I also agree with you on one thing is that we cannot project, because I think there is a human element to this that is being not recognized about, social aspects. I mean, there is only so much social you can do on a flat screen with two-dimensional imaging. And so I think there is an element of, we're already seeing that in our organizations, right? I mean, all of us, including ourselves, you feel that internal groan that, oh no, here comes the next meeting, right? You're clicking from one meeting to the next. There's no people interaction all day long. The interaction seems to be to a large extent, manufactured, right? But having said that, I think most organizations, at least ours was, and I know several others, were thinking about the same set of problems. What is sustainable in the long run? Okay, is it, for example, we are growing very, very fast in India, right, as an organization. And over the last year and a half, most of our conversations used to revolve, a year and a half ago, our conversations revolved around how are we going to get seats for all our employees, how many new buildings we needed, how did we keep constructing more and more to accommodate, our employees in their offices. I think that conversation has switched not only for our company, but as an industry to saying, look, flexibility is the name of the game. We need to be able to be flexible in our work models that can accommodate several different, scenarios of working. One, in the office, some people need to be in the office. I mean, if you're working with certain kind of industries which require machinery access, it's very hard to do that remotely, right? I mean, there needs to be some people who, if you're maintaining machinery or you're testing machinery, physical machinery, it's kind of hard to be, remote, right? But there is a large chunk of people who can work. Most of their work can happen without having to come into the office on a daily basis. But we also recognize that interaction among people, among teams, is a very important culture building activity. I mean, one of the things you realize in the last 1 year is that most cultural aspects, even if you knew your co-workers personally because you used to work in the office, you feel a sense of separation from your co-workers and the ability to interact with them and empathize with them on a daily basis. Now, imagine people who have joined a new company during the last 1 year, who have sight unseen. They have not even seen the office because they were interviewed virtually, they were onboarded virtually. They have no cultural context to the company other than what they hear from others. It's a very, very hard problem, right? Because how do you, part of organizational culture and behavior is how do you build that culture of the organization? And a lot of it is myths and stories that you tell about the company, about the people that you work for, leadership, right? Various other things. Now you can do that, but until people feel a sense of it, until you walk into a physical three-dimensional space and you're able to experience it, it's very difficult to convey it, right? And I think that is part of the problem that every organization is starting to deal with, is the human elements of it, the mental health aspects of it, culture building aspects of it. How do you build loyalty to the company and to each other? How do you actually, build that empathy and camaraderie that comes from, sitting face to face and having some dialogues, right? I think those are the kind of challenges we're going to run into. Right? It's not the technology part of it. I think we'll solve that because those are easy.
I completely agree with you. That kind of interaction is required. What I meant is now instead of that being a casual thing, in the sense I've been going to office, I go, maybe you have to make, as you rightly said, flexible. People joining for 1 year, not seeing office, they will not. Maybe you will have to orchestrate create a design where you allow some time to socialize, it becomes a new challenge you need to work with.
No, absolutely. I think, I think I see a question here that somebody has asked about what were the projections for 2020 in 2000. I have no idea. In 2000, we were dealing with the Y2K crisis. Everybody, I remember, on January 31st, 1999, we were all kind of sitting on our edge trying to figure out whether the lights would go out and power will go out.
Yeah,
Water
power
supply will get
stations
shut
will,
off.
stop,
I had a colleague. I used to be in Detroit in those days, and I had a colleague who worked with me who had loaded up his house with 1 year worth of groceries, and he had bought a few guns to protect his house. Right? I mean, so people were going to all kinds of extremes. So we didn't know. And 2000 was the height of the .com boom. So everything was going to be internet. Everything was, from a technology perspective, the world was going to look very different. It did look different over time, right? But it became part of the fabric of how we operated and how we lived, and that just got imbibed into it. So, coming back to this question of work and life, it's very difficult to project out 10 years. I totally agree. But what we are starting to see, and I think some of the things that were getting, there were a few areas that were getting, one was this flexibility of work. People are already talking about that. In fact, when we designed our new offices, we just brought online 2 new offices in India. And these were designed in 2019. And at that time, we said no fixed seating for employees. Everybody will be able to book a seat in any office they wanted to go. And now, guess what? That is actually coming to bear in a positive way right now. Right. Second is this whole project thing of enterprises were going to get digital transformation was going to happen. Right. I mean, there was a promise. Everybody talked about digital transformation. They still talk about it. But the last year accelerated it dramatically. The fact that traditional industries started working from home, people working in a bank started working from home. That changed the whole paradigm. I mean, I in other forums I've called it a tear in the space-time fabric. Right? Things don't go back. However much we wish for a life that was in 2019, I don't think we'll ever roll back to it 100%. Okay, so that's one piece of it which will keep changing, adjusting, etc. The nature of work is going to change. I think, being employed by one company may not be the future. I don't know. I think there's some jokes going around that, in the Valley, there are somebody working for one company in the morning and another company in the afternoon because they never exited the first company before joining the second company. Now, that may be illegal. There may be labor laws that may be violated by doing that, but it is conceivable, right? You don't, you're working from home. It's part of the gig economy.
I guess it's going to happen. In IT, we are talking of hyper-converged infrastructure.
Yes.
So if you put it into workspace, professionals will work, contribute to many companies, whatever. I mean, possible.
Yeah. I mean, I can have, the companies will have to adjust, the technology will have to adjust, but maybe I could be a gig worker where I work for one company in the morning and another company in the afternoon. Or 1 week I work for one company, second week I work for a different company. I mean, these are work models that can change over time, right? That's the second area is what I would say is that. Third is convergence. You talked about hyperconvergence, but that's a different kind of a convergence. I'm talking about the physical and digital world converging.
Okay.
We talked about, industry 4.0 that was being bandied about, right? But nobody really knew whether industries which have physical manufacturing could indeed be digitally enabled in a way in which could do a lights out manufacturing. I think the last year has also started accelerating that part of it, right? Where the operational technology and the information technology or IT within the companies have started merging. And now you see a lot more discussions about real applications where edge is coming to bear. Clearly happening. The fourth area I would say is the other part of it is the biological world and the digital world coming together. The fact that we were able to come out with a vaccine in 8 months is an acceleration. I don't think this would have been possible even 5 years ago, right? Technologies are converging very rapidly, and digital plays a big role in that. The ability to get access to data. Healthcare is going to be completely disrupted. The way we are, we will look at healthcare 10 years from now will be very different than the way we look at it today, right? The doctors will be enabled.
I just wanted to chip in there. Do you see that things like, say, artificial intelligence playing a large role in healthcare, wherein say rural India could get access to healthcare like never before. Today, many parts of rural India do not have access because people do not want to physically travel there. So could we use a combination of digitization, digital means, and then health, and then artificial intelligence, or whatever, to get it across to them. Is that a possibility?
No, absolutely. I think the first step in that is telemedicine, right? The ability to access a doctor who's far away, from by people who don't have access to healthcare in, like you said, rural areas, etc., right? The basis of that is connectivity. I think the last year has proven that connectivity exists. There is ubiquitous connectivity, available. At least a large chunk of the country is connected at this point in time, and that will get better over time. Second piece to this is tools and mechanisms, right? I think the rudimentary aspects of those tools are existing today. You can do telemedicine, remote, video-based, doctor consultations today remotely. There were some regulatory aspects to this. There is the other piece to this which we should talk about is how is regulation changing? How are government laws getting amended? For example, forever Department of Telecommunication had a rule that you couldn't merge the PSTN systems and the VoIP systems, right? We couldn't work from home. DOT did not allow people to work from home. That was an exception that was done on March 25th, 2020 on an emergency basis, when the country went into a lockdown. Until then, it was illegal to work from home, technically, right? The labor laws didn't allow it. So those were put into abeyance when that happened. Now, Department of Telecommunication has completely changed the law. They are now allowing you to work from home. So, especially call center type work, which could not be done from home earlier, right? Now it has become legal to do that going forward forever, right? So they've completely removed that. So there's a whole regulatory aspect of this that also needs to evolve along with the technology and the societal aspects that come with it. So same thing with telemedicine. Telemedicine was a regulated aspect. So now they're going to allow it, right? Or maybe they've already allowed it. So there is that. Third piece is what you're talking about, which is there enough ubiquitous data availability so models can be built? Because the rural population may require a different model from artificial intelligence or machine learning perspective than somebody in urban India versus somebody in a different part of the world. So you can't train a model on data, let's say in Europe, and think that it'll work in rural India because the people are different. So that is what I mean by the biological world. So data being generated by individuals and cohorts, they can be analyzed and models built that will actually work for that population. So those are evolving too. But that also requires a certain amount of regulatory aspects because there are privacy involved. There needs to be data being collected at scale for those cohorts and models being trained for them. So there is no biases against it. So there's a range of things that need to come together, but certainly these are all possibilities that exist as we look into the future.
So I have a question. Yeah. So I have a question. I think I'll more get into job roles, right? I think I read an article a few months back. There is something called Institute for the Future in Dallas, Texas, and it says that I think in the continuation of the same discussion, it says that 80% of the roles that will be there in let's say 10 years from now are not yet invented. Now, I think that brings me to as a placement officer. Often I get this question from the from students, right? What kind of roles will be there, right? As early as, let's say, 2 years, 3 years from now, right? Because I think the transfer as early as 2-3 years from now. So what is your opinion on, let's say, some of the back office jobs, financial analyst jobs, and so on? What kind of transformation do you see, and how soon do you think that transformation will happen? And I ask that from the point of view of students to reskill themselves. More from that point of view.
So I'm a little hesitant to project out saying what job roles may exist and what's going to disappear. I mean, certain things will get automated, no doubt. I mean, if there are things that can be automated, they will get automated. There's no doubt, and that's only accelerating. The advice I would give people, and I've got this question many times in the last year about what should I do to skill myself. On the engineering side, people will ask what languages should I learn, right? And the business school side, they'll ask what jobs should I aim for. And my answer remains pretty consistent on that, right? Focus on the fundamentals. the more you are able to break down problem statements, the ability to frame problems, the ability to analyze situations, the ability to have good analytical thinking and frameworks to do that. Prepare yourself to a world where you need to have fundamental skills rather than specific skills, job skills, because specific job skills will disappear, right? Because the world is evolving. So you can't say that I'm going to be doing this for the next 30 years. It doesn't work. I can take myself as an example because I have done so many different roles in my own career, right? It's not probably, and I've gone back and forth between, small companies, entrepreneurship, and large companies, right? I mean, last 20 years have been large companies, but within large companies itself, I've worked in enterprise domain, I've worked in consumer domain, et cetera, right? So I think the thing that I would look back and say what stood up well for me in learning, so I'm confident enough now that if you drop me into a new job, within 90 days, I'll be up to speed, at least dangerously armed to move forward, right? And I think that's the skill that people need to develop. How quickly can you come up to speed into a new role as much as you can? And that comes down to fundamentally, being able to form an opinion very quickly, relatively quickly, have a point of view, have a framework of learning in a way in which you can quickly come up to speed on a new opportunity and take it forward. So it's very difficult to prognosticate and say that, hey, you know what, these are 3 roles that you have to prepare for next 3 years. It's very difficult. If you build your skills, understand your fundamentals, have very good problem framing the problem skills, ability to analyze skills are problem. I think those things will stand you well over time, irrespective of what job.
So, I mean, I will just add one more question actually to that. Is for management students specifically, what do you think? I mean, is awareness or knowledge on business technologies is essential beast now going forward, or earlier management students could stay away from technology actually completely? Let's say 10 years for right earlier. What is your opinion on that?
No, you have to be digitally aware.
That would be very, very helpful to know. Yeah.
You have to be digitally aware. I mean, every business is now a digital business.
Mm-hmm.
There is no business that you can talk about which is not digital business. I mean, we are talking about, right now we are in this conversation, we are talking about healthcare, we are talking about, manufacturing, we are talking about, probably agriculture as we look into the future, we are talking about all domains, right? Every domain is becoming a digital domain. Digital will form the basis of this. So I actually cringe a little bit when people say IT, because it's not IT anymore. Digital is not IT. I mean, the old view of IT was you were supporting the business. The new world, digital is the business. Everything else revolves around it. And I think so, even if you're not from a technologist, I mean, in India, 80%, I would imagine your average class is probably technologists, have an engineering degree by background. That's not sufficient in my mind. And it doesn't need to be. You can have a doctor who's, extremely digitally savvy, right? But I think that is a skill that needs to be maintained over time. You have to learn what's happening on the world around you. What does cloud mean, right? Even if you're not from the tech domain, you need to understand, what does cloud bring you? What is, what are some of these technology areas? What is cybersecurity? I think that is going to be an extremely important skill in the future to understand the risk management. Because if you're in business and you're a business person, you got to manage risk. That is what you're, or let's say you go to banking, right? You got to manage risk. It's risk management is a large chunk of what you do as a manager in organizations. And to do that, you have to understand technology.
So great. I have a question from one of my students, Chetan, and he talks about this very popular author called Yuval Noah Harari, who says that going ahead, and fundamentally, because I'm sort of merging one more question, who says that how would AI affect the workforce, and so would there be a useless class of unemployed people, and would it create social issues basically?
Yeah, I think the social issues are already showing up, right? You have large chunk of young people, particularly in India, who don't have a means to make a living, right? Because jobs have changed. Even if you're degreed, doesn't mean you're ready for the job, right? Or for the new class of jobs that may be emerging. Also, the number of jobs that are emerging are reducing. If you look at automation to a large extent, it is doing that, right? The class of jobs getting created are one step below what people would need to maintain a certain class of the ability to maintain a lifestyle. So I think it's going to get more and more important. I think it's a big social issue, and I won't even pretend to have an answer for this, but needs to be solved, right? Job creation. So one of my mentors, and there is an organization there. There are several organizations that are looking at how do you create mass entrepreneurship, because looking for an employment may not be the answer as we look at it. Can we create micro entrepreneurs, people who can make a living on their own? I think the gig economy was the first experience of that, right? Where people started driving for Uber or delivering packages. Yes, they are low-end jobs, they are low-paying jobs over time, but that again could be an opportunity. What we talked about in the beginning of the session, right? We said, hey, maybe the answer is people have land up with 2 jobs, but they may take 2 jobs, right? That leaves 4 people without jobs, maybe perhaps, right? Because they may be doing the job of 2 people. So we have to think through this from a societal impact as well, and not just look at it from a technology lens or a business lens. I think it is going to be, the world is getting, the book that he refers to, Sapiens, and then Homo Deus, talk about this aspect. The world is getting more and more crowded, right? And if you don't have livelihoods, if people can't make a living, it is going to create social unrest. And we collectively, I think that is a responsibility of organizations and government and everybody else to come together. That's where the whole CSR Act came in. Is there a way for us to get people to invest into that to actually make it happen? Entrepreneurship, it doesn't need to be a tech entrepreneur. You can still be an entrepreneur, right? Servicing the larger industry. So I think that whole economy, the positive cycle of that needs to come up. So clearly needs to be looked at, for sure.
I think I like what you express. People have to get strong with fundamentals, because if you become generic, your ability to learn, enthusiasm, mentally active, you're able to, basically create a framework for the problem solve. Those will be valuable. Then if you can develop that ability, you can also do multiple jobs simultaneously. Livelihood will not be an issue. So the responsibility, I also agree with that micro entrepreneurship. Ultimately, you work for many, your skills, your abilities are used. That's your value creation. So that is the only way to security. Otherwise, if you can't do it yourself, you're helpless. The earlier we do the transformation at individual level, it is better. Possibly university, educational institute will have to direct the students also towards that, championing that.
I think it needs to start at lower classes level, right? Where we change the way children learn. Need to be more experiential learning, the ability to analyze problem statements, etc. Because you can't teach this at a higher age. You got to start early on. And mass education, right, of certain kinds of things. So I think it's definitely a problem, and there are brighter minds than mine certainly looking at this, and I hope that they're able to solve it.
So, Mr. Narayanan, there's an interesting question from, I think, semester 3 student from Executive MBA. He says, this was not thinkable about a year ago. Coming home from a full day's work and then carrying out a fireside chat. And this has become a regular feature now. Over the last 1 year or so, all our talks and the distinguished speaker series happen like this. So are we heading for a burnout situation? Are people working harder, longer hours? What's actually happening? Because I hear it all the time. My students say, I don't have time to do my assignments these days because, organizations are pushing us to work harder from home because of digitization and accessibility. And Zoom, of course.
See, the workday never ends. And I think that's the unfortunate part. When we had that separation, at least the commute time was a way you could de-stress yourself and switch mentally from home to work and back, right? That has gone away. And I think that is burning people out. The average workday has gone up by an hour or hour and some. I saw some data the other day, said over an hour or whatever, right? An average workday has gone up. I think there's an information overload. There's only so much context switching you can do during a day. If you're jumping from one meeting to the next meeting, no break, nothing, it's an information overload. I feel it. I'll be honest. I feel it all the time. I mean, I find myself that my ability to process a large amount of information. I used to pride myself in the fact that I can do a lot of context switching. I've run large businesses, large global businesses of diverse types, and I had no problem dealing with it. I'm finding now that I am not able to. I'm actually trying to figure out how to narrow my information overload, not expand it, right? Which means that if you have a lot more seminars and online and all these things, plus you're getting bombarded with other information, it is just becoming very difficult for people to process all of this and be able to make sense out of it. And it is an overload. And I think, different organizations are trying out different things. We have switched, for example, we don't do half an hour meetings, we do 25-minute meetings. We don't do 1 hour meetings, we do 50-minute meetings. The goal behind that is you at least get that 5 minutes or 10 minutes between. But you have to be disciplined, right? Otherwise, every meeting will leak over and then you start doing this. We as an organization, VMware, last year we gave 10 extra days of vacation for employees to just take if they wanted to. We called it pandemic leave, but it was 10 days on top of our existing leave balance that no questions asked, and nobody was allowed to say, you can't take those days off, right? The managers were told not to do that, right? So they could take the days off to deal with their own personal stress or family issues or whatever. And we also shut down the company between Christmas and New Year. Entire world, right? Zero emails, right? So it's like, so I think things like that, organizations are trying out different things, how to keep this going. But it is a problem. And I think I'm hoping that people would figure out, how to manage their time in a way in which they're able to maintain some sense of balance, right? But on the other hand, we also see that it has helped in certain other ways. It has helped certain cohorts of people to actually participate in the workforce. Diversity type of we have had a lot of women who couldn't participate in the workforce because of family reasons and things like that, or they had to move away to a remote location because they got married. Now that constraint goes away. They can continue to participate in the workforce because they can participate remotely. So or people with disabilities, right, who couldn't commute, who couldn't participate in the workforce. Suddenly those opportunities open up. So I think while one door may close, another door may open up. So I think it's definitely a good and a not so good, all mixed into it.
We can only hope that we are at the right door. That's all. I was reading an interesting article where, after 1857 and the so-called First War of Indian Independence, or the British call it the Mutiny, where they changed the court language from Urdu to English or Persian to English, and the whole set of people were put out of jobs. They went into poverty almost immediately. So opportunities, while they open for one set of people, they might actually close for another set of people. And I think
that has happened over time, Professor Subbarao. I mean, if you think back, right? I mean, even a few years ago, we had typewriter factories that don't exist anymore. Right. So this is an evolution. It will always happen. I mean, it's not, you can't stop evolution of.
So in that direction, you started off with the automobile industry. So do you see the automobile industry actually going into terminal decline?
No, transportation is still going to be required, right? So I don't see that happening. It may change. I mean, the players in that could change, right? I mean, Tesla was not even existing, and suddenly they are like the darling of the automotive. They don't even describe themselves as an automotive company. They are a transportation company, right? Digitally enabled transportation company. And I think so. Legacy players will disappear. Just as a sidelight, there is Ford has a museum in Dearborn, Michigan, and there's a whole wall, right, which has all the brands that used to exist in the United States in the automotive space in the beginning of the 20th century, right? 1930s, 1920s. You look at all the brands, and then you go, where did they go? Where did they go? They all disappeared, and ultimately you landed up with 3 in the United States, right? Ford, Chrysler, and GM, and then now Tesla, of course. So evolution is part of the game. Consolidation is part of the game, right? I mean, if you look at even the tech industry, I mean, if you go back to 80s to 90s to, it has evolved. The FANG, as they talk about, they just, companies disappear. I used to work for Yahoo. You don't hear about Yahoo anymore, right? Because they got acquired by Verizon. But they were like the pioneers of the internet. So, evolution is always part of the game.
Yeah, the companies which kickstart the business won't exist to see the growth. That is the way it has happened. Yeah. Right from Kodak to, as you said, Yahoo, pioneers have disappeared. No more surviving. Yeah.
And more will happen. I mean, General Electric is another big brand, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you don't.
Gone. Very bad.
Yeah, I mean, on the S&P 500 now, an average longevity of a company in the S&P 500 is less than 7 years.
Oh, that is a disaster, really.
It is what it is. I mean, you deal with it.
So interestingly, I came through an article I shared. Now there is a thinking going on whether big companies are good at all, or you have kind of federated small companies, because in tough times, big companies collapse like dinosaurs.
Yes and
Yeah.
no. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. No, I actually wanted to change tack, and this is something that I asked you the other day as well. So take us through. This is a fascinating subject for me. Are we at a point where the Earth cannot support, say, large-scale meat industries and so on and so forth? And are we moving towards an era of veganism where more and more people are going to become vegans? Virat Kohli is a good example. He may not be the most popular guy at the moment after losing the test match, but nevertheless, he's super fit. And are we going to see trends in that direction where meat consumption, as we understand it, is going to come down in the next 10, 15 years?
I have a bias because I'm a vegetarian. So take it with its pound of salt. I think, I think the bigger question to ask here is, what are the drivers of climate change? And what are the big contributions to it, right? And the meat industry has been pointed to as one of the large contributors to global climate, in terms of not being sustainable in the long run. I think the plant-based, products, right? Nutritional products, I won't even call it meat, is starting to take hold. I think you see that trend starting to take hold globally. In the past, you could travel to many parts of the world and not get anything to eat, right? Because you just, especially if you're a vegetarian, it's very hard to find, food that is edible for most of us, right? If you're a vegetarian. That has changed dramatically. Even I can speak from the time I went to the United States when I was in 1986, when I went there as a student. And it was not easy you have to cook, you have to learn to cook. So I learned to cook because I couldn't find anything else to do, right? I mean, I couldn't just walk into a restaurant and eat. One, you couldn't afford it as a student, but two, the options were limited. Today, if you go, it's flipped around, right? Every restaurant's got a vegan menu. It's at least got a vegetarian menu, if not a vegan menu. And options are there, and they're very good options, right? So the world is changing. I think plant-based food, and of course, now there's fake meat. A lot of companies which are coming up around that. And not having tasted meat, I can't attest to whether it is really the taste is exactly the same or not. But people who are non-vegetarians are attesting to the fact that when they taste fake meat, they can't tell the difference, or at least they're reaching a point where the texture, the taste, the smell, whatever they get, it doesn't change. It looks almost like meat, right, when they eat it. So I think, definitely, I think things are moving in that direction. And the other point that you made, which is about Virat Kohli's example, is there was always a notion that vegetarians were not strong. They didn't have the stamina. They couldn't be fit. And I think people are proving that. And he's not the only one. Novak, Djokovic is vegan. There's a lot of other athletes who've been vegan over time, and they're at top of their game, and they're doing it, right? So veganism is a cultural and a religious aspect to it also. I think people who are vegan are very, they're very militaristic about it sometimes. But I think it's a choice. I think it's an individual choice. And some people, it's a healthy choice sometimes. I think that's what I keep hearing from people. But I can't do without my morning coffee. So that is my extent of veganism. But I eat plant-based food otherwise.
Yeah, actually, I had an interesting experience. I think in New York, where I walked into a restaurant and found so it said vegetarian restaurant, but then I found buffalo wings and various other such, and it was very confusing. And then I found actually that it was all vegan stuff, but named after, say, or called like non-vegetarian stuff. Anyway, it's a very interesting thought, and it's fascinating as to what will happen in the next 10, 15 years. And actually, my colleague who you met the other day, Dr. Dige, is here in the panel. So I would invite Rahul to, ask a question if he has a question. Yes.
Yes. So sorry, I joined late, but the question I have, I think some of the discussion was on around that was going on when I joined. Skills versus are skills permanent? I think all of us know that no skill is actually permanent, but the issue of skill versus talent. I mean, if you clearly see the distinction between software product companies versus maybe services companies, and there is some heavy leaning towards raw talent in product companies. If one could one could say that. So what is your take on it? I mean, is it raw talent that is going to matter if continuous reskilling is going to be required? Or is it simply perseverance through which you can adapt and change yourself, adapt yourself to the new environments? What is your take on it? I mean, I know that this maybe borders on talking about is raw intelligence more important or perseverance more important, but just like to know what you think about it.
Personally, I would hire for attitude over intelligence, because I think attitude matters.
Yeah.
If you think of yourself as God-given, you're the answer to all problems, you're not going to get far. I think, the pieces that you mentioned, right? So to me, it's about somebody who has fundamental skills. Of course, a certain level of intelligence is important to analyze scenarios and all that, but that can be taught, right? It's not about raw intelligence or native-born intelligence. People can be taught to think differently, think about things, etc. But they need to be open about it, right? A certain level of humility is required to say, I don't know, let me go learn. And I need to keep learning. Learning never stops. I mean, I've been in this business for a long time, and every day is a new day. I learn something new every day from everybody I meet with, right? Even this conversation, there's a lot of interesting things that are coming up, which requires further analysis or understanding and things like that. So I totally agree with you, Rahul, that it's very important to have a good attitude, humility, the ability to learn. The ability, when I say learn, it's not just about sitting in classes and learning. It's about being able to frame a problem, right? How do you listen to a conversation and be able to frame a problem, a hypothesis around it, and then be able to negate or validate it? I think those are fundamental skills that I would hire for. And when I hire somebody, it doesn't matter how senior they are. Those are the things that I look for, not about how many languages they know and what have they done. I look for experience. For a more senior person, how many different experiences have you been through, and what did you learn from that? Good and the bad, right? And I think those things are important to help people learn over time and be, like I said, have a good attitude, keep learning, work with people, and then be able to analyze situations and come up with decisions.
Right. So the sort of maybe the follow-up question on that is it while things change and one should adapt, one has to adapt to the changes and relearn or learn new things. Is it likely? I mean, is it likely that it's very speculative, but is it likely that a certain set of people may not actually be able to keep pace? And I mean, it's survival of the fittest in general in the world, anyways, in the animal world, and certainly in different ways in the human world as well. But are some people going to be fundamentally maybe not fit to adapt that quickly? I mean, that is probably one of the prevailing fears, while people accept, I think, that they will need to change. I think some people are worried that am I actually capable of taking on the change? And I mean, with this automation thing being thrown into the mix, that I think scares people a lot. So
Yeah.
what do you think about?
No, we talked about this earlier also about jobs disappearing, what kind of jobs may not exist, and things like that. Certainly confidence is an issue. And if you have not been doing this, if you're in your mid-career, I think the most vulnerable are people who are in their mid stages of their career. Because if you're out of touch with learning and you've been doing the same job for n number of years, over 10 years, I would say it's probably mid, then you're ripe for disruption, right? Because the job may change on you and you're not able to adapt. People who are early in their careers have a little more flexibility to go in different directions. They can go back to school. So certainly that needs to be, I think, I don't think there's any job right now that you can take for granted that it's going to exist in the next few years, right? Every job, I mean, it doesn't matter what job. You could be the CEO of the company, you could be the entry level new college graduate. Every job is ripe for disruption and change. Not because that people are, coming after you. It's just that the world is changing so rapidly, business environment is changing so rapidly that things change, right? So I think it's very important for people to figure out how to keep in touch, how to constantly learn, right? When I say learn, maybe in your preferred domain, if you're in a certain career aspect, look around you, see what are areas that people need to keep themselves sharp in what is going on, and continue on that path. Now, confidence is something that each person has to, of course, there are environment can create confidence for you, right? By looking around and seeing who else is doing it. Organizations can help with that by encouraging people to continue to learn, create environments and learning opportunities for people. That's one area which, we work very hard on is how do you do people development? So it's not just about hiring people. It's about once people have been hired, how do you help them develop themselves? That's what talent management is about, right? It's not just about analyzing a fit of a people for a role. It's also about anticipating what is going to come up and how do you prepare them for the next wave of things that are coming. And that's an organization's responsibility along with the individuals to do that.
Right. And I think human beings with their innate creativity, will find different ways, if not only to adapt to exist new jobs, but maybe even create value to human beings that have not been seen before. I mean,
Yeah.
So
No, absolutely. I think we talked about the gig economy in the beginning, before you joined. We talked about micro entrepreneurship. You're seeing a lot of that. You're seeing a lot of people suddenly, who have a job but also are doing, I would say, things like baking cakes and selling it to people. That's a micro entrepreneurship, right? They're using their time to starting to create another set of economic opportunities for themselves on the side when they do that. And it should be encouraged. I think I'm a big fan of that, personally.
So, Mr. Narayanan, there's a very interesting question from a semester 1 student of the MBA. There's a young lady called Shahana Afroz, and she asks whether, talking about one door opening and another one shutting, is telemedicine actually really going to affect how hospitals function?
No, I think tertiary hospitals will still need to be there. I mean, if you want to undergo surgery, you can't just, you can't do that through telemedicine, right? I mean, you may have. So I think we'll start to see. I think the thing about telemedicine to a large extent is again bringing people. It's about diversity of patients that you can get access, who can get access to medical help. Today, we may be a whole. I think Captain Subbarao, we talked about rural India. Our density of doctors to citizens is very, very low, right? Compared to many other countries. And the only way people will get access, I mean, we hear stories in rural areas where people have to go, many kilometers before they get even to a primary health center where they can see even a doctor or a nurse practitioner who can get this thing. Now, if there is connectivity and they have a mobile phone or mobile device, then you can now include a lot more people into the healthcare net, right? So I think hospitals, I don't think there's any danger of hospitals disappearing. Now, the business models of hospitals could change over time. There's going to be a class of potential companies that are going to spring up, which may disintermediate the hospital itself, for certain kinds of things. I'm on the board of Sukino, which is a company that is about managed care of patients. This is for helping patients who have chronic health conditions, who need full-time care, but don't want to be in a hospital. Right now, that is another class of companies that are coming up, which is about helping chronic patients, but not necessarily in a hospital environment. Right? They could be in the home, it could be in a facility which is custom built for doing that. Those kinds of things that create new opportunities. Now that is going to create a whole class of new jobs for people who will come up. So I like the point I think Rahul made about human creativity. Over millennia, that has always been the case. Right?
I think you triggered some quick thoughts in me. Want to share? So what I think, looking at myself in the past, I've taken up jobs even if they didn't pay much, right? Because I saw learning opportunity that later created a lot of potential for me later. I didn't know, I didn't think that way. So going forward, should the attitude of young people should be take up a job because they pay more, or take up a job where learning opportunity contribution is more, because that is an asset. What I earn, income is income, but what I learn goes into my balance sheet, it becomes asset. I think the priorities have to change.
I agree. I think open yourself into more and more experiences, as you point out.
So
don't go for the title, don't go for only the money. I mean, money is important. Let me not minimize that, right? I mean, you got to build a net worth for yourself over time. But building those experiences, I think taking risk, I think what you're pointing to is take a risk.
Yeah, absolutely.
Risk pays off over time.
Yeah.
So there's, this chat has been fascinating, and we've got a lot of youngsters. And I think one question that Meghna asks is, how does she enhance her skills being a youngster? What is a possible roadmap that you could recommend?
I think, like I said, skill and experiences come from many things. A job is only one way of looking at it. Okay. But even within a job, what I would encourage people to do, and we do that, is get involved in things which are beyond your ambit of your way a job is defined. Most companies have other avenues to participate. Whether it could be community activities, it could be learning activities, it could be, industry, engagement that can happen. That's one side to it. That's one piece that you can certainly do. The more you get engaged with people, see, at the end of the day, you got to build a network of people for yourself, right? That you can draw upon over time, because those relationships is what pays off over time, because you get to meet a variety of people, diversity of people, and you can draw upon them for your own personal learning and future opportunities as they come up. So as a young person, I would encourage you to start to learn to build a network for yourself, a mentor network that you can lean on and turn to for various aspects of things to do. That's one skill worth learning, right? Second is, don't stop with the degree that you've got. Your learning is not your degree that you're holding in your hand. Your learning is from, opening yourself mind up, reading, reading and analyzing, not just reading. I see a lot of people nowadays reading to put it on LinkedIn. But I think there's an element of teaching that goes with it, right? The more you read and use that to analyze it, and then use it as a mechanism to engage others, is actually net positive. Now, when I say read, I'm being a little loose about it. It can be reading, watching, whatever, right? Open yourself to a world of experiences that are out there as a young person. The more you do that early on, the better off you are in the longer run. And then, like Professor Shankar was saying, take risks. You're young, right? You can take a risk. It's nothing there. You don't need to be in a career path that is defined for you, over time. Take risks, move around, look for other experiences. Don't waste your time in places where you're not learning. And go find your next gig that will actually help you learn more, or something new.
Yeah, maybe I would like to add one line to that. I think to the question, for whatever it is worth, maybe it's worth only 2 cents or $2, whatever. But I think what I found true is, the more time of your day you spend actually trying to add value to anything around you, it always pays off in the long run. I mean, you learn when you're actually trying to, you of course learn from, you can learn a lot from people around you, and most people that you think don't have anything to offer to you actually have. Secondly, I think if you try to solve problems which exist, rather than sort of saying that, my role is only this, there is a lot that you actually gain, and you will be amazed how a lot of that will be useful maybe 20 or even 30 years down the road. And I think Professor Shankar is pointing to that also.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
I think we think alike or not. Yeah, spot on. See, as Ram also said, my experience is my asset. Why should I refuse? Why shouldn't I do that? Why can't I may get nothing, but I'm building an asset, and that has a potential. I agree to that. I think our attitudes have to change more than the expertise. Expertise follows. In fact, attitude can be limiting. It may not grow our abilities. If you have the right attitude or enthusiastic in learning, I feel it goes a long way. I mean, getting money, having 2 cars instead of 1, they are temporary, but long run, you lead a life with a lot of confidence. I think that is more vital than having multiple assets and having loan to pay. That is a different issue. Maybe I talk too much, but overall, I agree with that. I think focus should be on building one's abilities. That's what I think.
So we've had a fascinating discussion, and since again there are a lot of young people on this fireside chat, how do you see the entertainment industry moving? Do you think there are going to be paradigm shifts, or are we already seeing it? And streamed entertainment, on-demand entertainment, and so on and so forth. What direction do you think it's going
in? As we look at it today, there's been a seismic shift in the last year and a half, how entertainment is delivered, right? It's on demand and across a plethora of platforms. So I think, but more fascinating it is to me is how so many new people are getting an opportunity to participate, right? I don't mean the viewership. I'm talking about people who are acting. If you look at a lot of new shows that are coming up, new movies that are being released on the streaming platforms, it's giving rise to a whole bunch of new class of actors, right, who would not have got a chance in the previous time. So it's creating opportunities. Again, going back to the point about, you had a certain model to how movie entertainment, particularly, and TV entertainment was being done. It was captive. It was, you needed to be part of this thing to do. But now it's getting, disaggregated, right? So OTT platforms is only one thing. You see a lot of YouTube shows. YouTube has opened up a whole plethora of channels for people to participate. Things like TikTok also did that, right? I mean, now there are homegrown versions of those kind of video platforms coming up. It is suddenly getting disaggregated, right? And now everybody can participate. So the democratization of entertainment industry is taking shape, and then viewership now have a choice to decide where they want to go, and be able to do that. And so it is creating a whole new set of opportunities for people as they look ahead, rather than cutting off something else. Yes, traditional actors may not be making as much money anymore, but it is actually letting a whole bunch of new people come into the industry, which was blocked for them in the past.
Yeah, I would, before I give my colleague Anant, who was trying to ask a question, the last question, I would request Professor Rajan to post the link for the digital certificate that people can take from this program. And Anant, all yours, you were trying to ask a question.
No, I was asking in the context of, the money question and the risk and all that, right? We should be able to take risk. And I do understand I think, as Captain said, a lot of young people are in the call, right? I think the question always comes down to how do I make more money actually, right? So from that aspect, and earlier you said that jobs are going to be a problem, and there are large number of people are going to be available. So I think I want to ask from the two aspects this question. One is how difficult it is becoming, or it is going to become for HR or talent acquisition to find right talent, and how important has or will marketing oneself, the skill will become actually, because there are a large number of people who are coming from tier 1 cities, tier 2 cities, and ability to market actually differs. I mean, I'm just being very aggressively honest. How important it is for young people to market themselves and develop skill in that area.
So I think the way to think about this is a little different. I mean, marketing is one aspect to it, but it can have a negative connotation too, because you're trying to project something that you're not. And I think you could very easily go down a path of you losing your genuineness to a large extent. And that becomes very clear after some time, right? The thing to think about here is, what do you stand for, and what's the brand that you would want to build for yourself? What is your brand you, right? What do you stand for? Just based on your own personal experiences, culture, growth, etc., where you come from. That's a very important piece, is what, projecting out what you stand for is very, very important. And that's not just for young people. I think it's young people of all ages, right? Need to be able to do that. What do you stand for? You need to be genuine, because people need to bring their genuine self to the table in every interaction that they do. So that's one piece to this, right? So yes, I think, like I said, you learn, you teach, you project, you help people. I think one aspect is how helpful are you to others, right? When you do that, I think a lot of social platforms are available, even professional social platforms. I'm not just saying LinkedIn. There are other places where other people of similar backgrounds come together to discuss problems, do that. And can you get known there, right? I mean, can you be helpful to others in a way in which you add value? I think either Rahul or Shankar talked about the fact that try to find a way to add value to every interaction that you do. I think that's important. That's first. Second thing. Third thing is, you ask about money, right? I mean, no money. If you're only chasing money, then no money is ever enough. We've had cases of people who are multimillionaires who will still end up going to jail because they thought they needed to become a billionaire. And I think that's not a winning game. Nobody knows how much money you're going to make. I don't know. There's a recent book, Psychology of Money, by Morgan Housel, right? And for the danger of projecting his book and not getting a cut on his on his royalty, I would say it's an extremely fascinating book, and I would encourage every young person of all ages to read it.
I missed the title. I missed the name of the title.
Psychology of Money.
Okay.
Morgan Housel, right? He's an investment banker from Wall Street, but his thesis is very, very, very simple. Spend less than what you make.
Oh, wonderful! Then you have a lot. You are rich, really.
So his point is, wealth gets built over time. It is not. You're not going to. Very rarely do people suddenly wake up one morning and suddenly become a billionaire. Yes, some people get lucky, but they have worked hard to get there, right? We only see the result. We don't necessarily see the input that went into it. So his point is very simple. Not everybody is lucky or capable of doing that over time. But a simple model is, save more than you spend and invest that for the long term, and invest it in areas which will accrue value to you, right? It could be money investment. It could be personal investment. The fact that people are doing executive MBA is a personal investment. It is an investment. They're paying for it, right? So I think that's his thesis. Very simple thesis. He's got about 20 points that he makes, but that book is taken by storm, right? The other book, which kind of opened my eyes about a year and a half ago, is Factfulness by Hans Rosling. So this point, and I would encourage people to read it, not because it's a good book, but this whole thesis of, is the world getting better or worse on a daily basis? He's no more now. He was a doctor who worked in a lot of the camps, like Ebola camps in Africa, etc. But the book is very, very good at reframing the point about how to analyze whether the world is getting better or worse on a day-to-day basis. And how do you think about the world in general, cohorts of people around the world? So those two books I would encourage people to read for the points we just talked about.
Great.
So wonderful session, Mr. Narayanan, and thank you very much indeed. We have sort of taken a lot of your time. And like somebody said, you have been extremely humble in answering all our questions with great expertise. And I just want to remind and thank all of our participants. And we actually started off with close to 200. That's a large number. That our next talk on the Distinguished Speaker Series is from the United States, where we have Professor Richard Ajayi, who is joining us from Temple University, Florida, to talk on international business. And that's on the 25th. And I would also like to thank Mr. Narayanan for taking time and being here with us today, and his staff, who actually assisted and talked us through leading up to today. We have a couple of young ladies who did that for us. I also want to thank my own team for sort of being here. That is Dr. Rahul DK, Professor Rajan, Arvind, Malati, and of course, the ever-present Mohammad Imtiaz, who does all these things so flawlessly for us. So thank you very much, everybody. And I'll see you. I quickly mentioned the names, Shruti Rajmohan and Sangeeta Mathad, who actually sort of coordinated this from Mr. Ramkumar's Narayanan's end. So thank you very much and good night and stay safe.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Enjoy.
And I hope to see you in class one of these days, talking to our students.
Sure. I would love that.
Thank you so much. Thank you.